see the protest at all and hear what they were out there for? And I wondered what your reaction was. I was asking Vinny about it. I mean, people seem really angry, and they were chanting stuff. And what do you make of it, and what does it mean for the session?
Well, what I make of it is consistent with our tradition here. You know, after all, it is in this city that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people was created, constitutional form of government, where the people took their government back. So whenever I see people wanting to participate in this process, I think that's a good day. And the more voices that we can get, whatever that voice is, the better we're going to be as far as making legislation. So, you know, I think it's always healthy for democracy to have people engaged and involved. And moving forward, you know, I hope we can continue that. It started on Election Day. We had record turnout. And I certainly hope that people continue to stay involved in the process.
Do you believe that they will have that opportunity, given that we're going to go with virtual hearings and likely virtual committee meetings? Is there going to be meaningful opportunity for meaningful participation?
That's a very good question. It's the reason why today in the Senate we voted no on the rules, is that while the rules allow and will move forward with a virtual legislative session, and that is good for two reasons, is that at least we've got the session open. We've got the legislators back in the building, which hasn't happened since March, and we are now getting the people's voice to the table. The issue becomes that the people who have virtual capacity, let me make sure, we also are going to have a safe and healthy environment for both legislators and staff to work in. We agree with that concept. But what is troubling is that, once again, this is the government of the people, and they need to be heard, and there's far too many people in Connecticut now that don't have the luxury and privilege of having the technology to become engaged, don't have the connectivity in their neighborhood, or those who actually do have the technology may not have the capacity to use that. And that brings me back to something that's dear to me, which is our seniors who are experiencing social isolation. And as much as you can't let family members in, it's still difficult because of the inability to handle and work the technology. So there are individuals who are not going to be able to participate. While this is a better step because it brings people's voice in where we had one person, and our government's not built for one person rule, but it's not the robust conversation. And, my question is, normally you see on opening day, colors, whether it's a red shirt with AARP or a purple of $11.99, where do those voices go? Where do they virtually congregate to make the same First Amendment statement that they're entitled to in our government?
State of the state today and the priorities that he laid out for the session?
Well, let's be clear. What we want is the middle class to have a voice, and to make sure that it not only has a voice, but that it brings relief and affordability to that middle class family who's struggling not only under the COVID economy, but also after a decade of Democrat control that has made Connecticut dead last in personal income growth and personal and job growth. We're dead last in the nation. And that has to change because there's too much financial stress on Connecticut's families, and that affordability and middle class voice needs to be heard.
My question is, how do you have a robust conversation? If virtual alienates some, but may bring in others, maybe people who can't come to the Capitol and spend 8 hours a day. So what is your suggestion? How do you can't have several hundred people show up here and testify on a bill. So how do you propose that be done?
Well, and you're right in the sense that, some voices aren't going to be heard. there are good things that happen here, and so this may actually increase voices after we get out of the pandemic to enable people to get in more virtually. But getting back to what we need to focus on, and I think until we get back to the possibility of a full session, we should limit what we do to only those things that are absolutely necessary, and not look to do things that may marginalize those individuals that, quite frankly, don't have the connectivity, that depend on government. Like urban school children that last spring, because they didn't have technology, weren't able to connect with and obtain their constitutional quality education.
First focus coming out of the gate for Long.
Well, I know our focus is to get the middle class voice back and to look at affordability. How can we reduce the overall cost and the burden placed on our families? That's first and foremost.
About recreational marijuana, gambling. Do you think those are things that shouldn't be taken up this session?
Well, first of all we're going through a pandemic. Public health and, to look at recreational marijuana, like that's their most important focus, knowing that Connecticut families are struggling financially. Many can't afford their rent. Many are looking down the barrel of bankruptcy. Businesses are closing. You drive down your street, you see a lot of the mom and pops. They're not making it anymore. And the Democrats are focused on gambling and marijuana? I don't know. To me, that's not focusing on what's important to Connecticut families. I think what's important to Connecticut's families is what kind of economy do we have? The Democrats have given us, an economy that doesn't perform. We need one that does. And we need to make sure that the Connecticut family can move forward.
Concerned about the religious exemption legislation coming up again. Is that something else that you think should not be dealt with now?
Well, you're looking at a piece of legislation that in the past got thousands of individuals to come front and center. I really believe that if we're not going to have, or we're not going to afford all voices an opportunity to be at the table and to have a meaningful First Amendment right, that the majority really should shy away from controversial legislation that we know in the past has gotten thousands of people to the Capitol, and wait for those days when we can afford people their right to voice their opinion. I think that's fair. And that's what I think we have to look at here, is just being fair. Not from what I'm hearing.
To follow up on Sue's question, the legislature is going to be meeting till June. You guys this is a lot of time, and we always hear that this isn't the time to discuss this issue or that issue, but in reality, you guys can do a lot of things at once. So, one, do you think that these things can be done without necessarily detracting from the more vital, as you see it, public health issues? And two, what have you told your members about introducing personal bills, since everybody in this legislature can now introduce legislation this session, at least present it to a committee?
Right. Part of proposing bills is setting forth, not only representing your district, and it's going to be dependent upon your district and what kind of issues you have in that district, as well as the senator's opportunity to voice their agenda, what they would like to see the vision for Connecticut to be. When we go forward, the one thing I look at here is, when we operate in a virtual world, not everyone's going to have an opportunity to speak. And many of the individuals that I outlined, if you can't afford it, if you're have it but can't, don't know how to necessarily utilize it, or you're in a section of Connecticut that doesn't have it, those folks many of them are those that are most dependent on government. And so I wouldn't want to move forward and change the way government really does a lot of its business if they're going to be further marginalized. I wouldn't want that to happen.
So what have you told your members about introducing personal bills? To limit them or not?
What I said was, you've got this opportunity. Let's see what you have, what types of bills you're looking at proposing. They go into our legal staff, and we'll go through them.
And Republicans lost some seats in the last election. Do you think that you're going to lose any influence, have any less influence in this building as a result of reduced numbers?
I don't believe so. I think while we lost 2 seats, we lost, 2 very good senators in George Logan and Gennaro Bizzarro that were very difficult districts to begin with. I think what I've always found in working under this dome is that if you stay focused on the issues and seek real solutions, that message will resonate. And so that is why I keep coming back to the affordability of Connecticut and the middle class voice, because I think those are the 2 biggest issues that are front and center. And affordability isn't just taxes, it's things like health care. And if we stay focused on those issues and bring relief to the middle class, that's going to resonate across Connecticut, regardless of whether we have 1 member or 12 or 18 or 22.
Are you proposing a middle-class tax cut? You've mentioned middle class multiple times here.
Let's, at this point, we're trying to get our legs underneath us. I haven't looked at that yet, but we're not going to take anything off the table at this point.
In a normal legislative session, hundreds of bills, right? Maybe as many as 500. So are you saying because of the handicap with virtual participation that lawmakers should streamline that and only take up very important bills? I mean, that's obviously subjective. Is that kind of where you're going with what your response was?
Yeah, I would look at things that are, while we're operating in the virtual world, the hope obviously is that we come out of this as soon as possible and can get back to normalcy as much as we can. But yes, you're right. While we're existing in that world, we should not be looking at just coming forward with every single issue and looking at ways, particularly legislation that may be controversial, where we've had substantial public input and had marches on the Capitol. At this point, there's going to come a time when we're not going to have social distance and masks. And at that time, I think it would be appropriate to bring it forward.
So the big ticket items, whether it be vaccines, pot, gambling, wait.
Well, I mean,
How about gambling?
look at gambling. We've been waiting for years. What's another couple months? That's just...
Speaking of that, what would be the number one issue? As you said, pot can be set aside and gambling can be set aside. What is the number one issue that you foresee Republicans working with the governor on in this session?
Well, I know... I mean, coming from my perspective and out of a ranking member as in insurance, I think health care is a number one issue that's hitting Connecticut's middle-class families. We've put forward a reinsurance program that has been reviewed by the exchange, the Wakely report, that comes back and says it's the most efficient way to reduce premium, reduce the overall cost of medical costs, and also the best way to leverage federal dollars. I know that the governor and the majority are also looking at this issue. They have the public option. So I think that's an area where we could work together to bring the relief that middle-class families so dearly need.
Do you think Republicans would vote for the public option?
The public option is let's be clear. The public option is a program that goes in direct competition with our flagship insurance industry and will cost Connecticut jobs and put the Connecticut taxpayer on the hook if the program runs in the red. We have a program that can deliver the same premium reduction. In addition, we will be able to look at the real driver, which is the cost of medical services, and get those under control. But it keeps Connecticut jobs. And that's what's an important distinction, and that's the difference. In our plan is to continue to improve the Connecticut economy and keep Connecticut jobs. The reason we're dead last in the nation in job growth is because of initiatives like the public option. It may work somewhere else in the United States. Maybe this is something good for Maryland that doesn't have that many insurance jobs. But here in Hartford, in Connecticut, it's not such a good idea.
Right, so you want healthcare improvements, but not public option as the way to do those improvements.
Correct. We want to bring relief to the middle class. This is something that the Democrats promised with the Affordable Care Act 8 years ago and have yet to deliver. And so what we would like to do is bring that relief to the middle class families and make sure that their health care becomes affordable. We believe this is the more prudent policy, the smarter policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you sticking around.